Hey everyone, today I'm going to be ranking the Mummy movies. Now, I already ranked the Universal Mummy movies when I did the Universal Horror ranking, so I'm not going to be including those. I'm just going to be doing the modern Mummy movies. And by modern, I mean starting with the 1999 Brendan Fraser Mummy movie and including everything that has been part of that franchise. I'm also throwing in the Tom Cruise one because Dark Universe didn't go anywhere, so it's only one more movie. However, at the end of this video, I will show the full ranking, including the 6 Universal movies. For those of you who are curious, both of you, even without the Universal ones, that still gives us 9 movies in total. As always, spoiler alert. Starting off, my number 9 is The Scorpion King 2: Rise of a Warrior. This was the first of the low-budget direct-to-video Scorpion King sequels, or in this case, a prequel. It was directed by Russell Mulcahy, the man who gave us Razorback and Highlander, but also gave us Resident Evil Extinction and Highlander 2. So, you know, mixed bag. I really don't have a lot to say about this movie, because I don't really remember it all that well. I remember that the guy playing young Matthias wasn't very good. He was kind of wooden. I remember very little of the action. I remember as she's escaping on horseback, I think with his girlfriend or love interest or whatever, and someone with magical abilities fires an arrow at him, and it's a magic arrow, so it follows him and gets stuck in his love interest's back and kills her. I remember that. Yeah, this is just a really forgettable movie. The practical effects are on point. The CGI is varying degrees of crap. I mean, this isn't like the worst movie ever. It's just like the regular kind of bad, like forgettable and bland. The problem with this one is that because it's a prequel, anytime Matthias is in danger, there's no tension, because we know he's going to survive and become the Rock. The score is 1.5 out of 5. Number 8 is The Scorpion King 4: The Quest for Power. This one I actually remember slightly better than 2. I don't like it, but I remember it. This has the return of Victor Webster, who was recast as Matthias after The Rock. Well, after the third movie didn't have the budget to get The Rock back, so he came back for part 4. And you know what? He's not a great actor, but he's decent enough as Matthias. This is the one where it's revealed that all the magic in this movie is actually just technology and science. Which, okay, in real life, yes, that is very much the case. However, in this universe, in this film universe, it has very clearly been established that supernatural shit happens. It is very real in this universe. So to have the 4th Scorpion King movie all of a sudden whip out, oh, by the way, all of the supernatural stuff going on in this movie? Like, they don't address, I don't think they address stuff from the other movies, but like, they're like, oh, all the supernatural stuff going on in this movie? Nah, it's just science. It's just technology. Like, there's a dragon. There's an actual dragon. But it's not an actual dragon because it's mechanical. The action in this one is better than it was in 2. That's also not saying much.
Get ready to die.
How's that for fishing?
So yeah, kind of like 2. This one's not super memorable. I don't have much more to say about it. The score is 1.5 out of 5. Number 7 is The Scorpion King 3: Battle for Redemption. Okay, so this movie came out in 2012. I don't remember when the trailers started dropping. Maybe they started in 2011, or maybe they didn't start until 2012. But I remember being like 13 or 14 and seeing trailers for this movie all the time.
Ron Perlman, Billy Zane, featuring Kimbo Slice and Dave Bautista.
This one is a small step up from 2, and also just slightly better than 4. This was brought to you by Raul Rene, who has brought us such classics as Death Race 2 and Death Race Inferno. Not a great sign. However, I will say, those are the 3 movies I've seen that he's made. Those, the Death Race prequels, and then this one. And I will say, out of those 3, this one is easily the best. That's not saying much. None of them are good, but this one is just the most competent.
You don't actually believe all this fantastic gibberish, do you?
Get you and your people to safety. We'll hold them off as long as we can.
Trying to crack some heads!
Like I said, talking about 4, Victor Webster is decent enough as Matthias. Boston Christopher plays his sidekick for this movie, Olaf. No, not that one. And he is honestly, he's fine. He is the overweight, bumbling sidekick, comic relief, who has like various fart jokes and stuff. But honestly, excluding the fart jokes and stuff, he's perfectly adequate as the comic relief. And he's actually decent in a fight. Like, he's not completely useless. He is not the load. It says something that he fought supernaturally powered Dave Bautista and survived. Like the Death Race prequels, the writing in this movie is not good. Like, the comic relief is fine, but the story itself is kind of a mess. This is a movie that is elevated by its cast. We have Ron Perlman for a few minutes, and he's, you know, he's not completely phoning it in. You have Billy Zane knowing exactly what kind of movie he's in and going full ham.
Billy Zane.
That was awesome. Like, Billy Zane is easily the most entertaining part of this movie. Now, Raul Rene is a cinematographer by trade. He just happens to have directed a few movies. He is a pretty good cinematographer. As a director, he's kind of crap. So, any moments of good acting in this movie happened in spite of his direction, not because of it. My score is 2 out of 5. My number 6 is The Scorpion King, Book of Souls. This is brought to us by Don Michael Paul, the living embodiment of the 2 out of 5 rating. Like, seriously, I have seen 5 movies from this man, and every single one of them is, like, equally meh. None of them are, like, bad enough to piss me off, but none of them are, like, fully competent. You can tell he has some visual flair. All of his movies have some good cinematography. This one's no exception. The acting is fine. None of it's great, but, like, none of it is particularly awful. I feel like Don Michael Paul is, like, the spiritual successor to Raul Rene, where he just comes into an established franchise and craps out a couple of direct-to-video sequels. I mean, the man is responsible for Tremors 5, 6, and 7, and also Death Race Beyond Anarchy, which was the follow-up to Raul Rene's films Death Race 2 and Death Race Inferno. You can't make this shit up. Peter Mensah is the best part of this movie. He is the one thing in this movie that is consistently good.
forgotten to time. But the ages have not dulled your cutting edge, have they?
Zach McGowan takes over as Matthias, which canonically means that Zach McGowan and Dwayne Johnson are the same person. The action in this movie is probably Don Michael Paul's best. That's not saying much. It's not great, but it's fine. There is some decent writing. It's more bad than good, but there is some good. I will say, out of all these Scorpion King sequels, this is the one where the budget shows the least. Like, 2, 3, and 4 all look varying degrees of cheap. This one also looks cheap, it just looks the least cheap. My score is 2 out of 5. And number 5 is The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. This was brought to us by Rob Cohen, the guy who gave us Triple X and The Fast and the Furious. And goddamn, what a step down. They needed a better script, because it is one of the 2 reasons Rachel Weisz didn't return. The other was that she had just given birth and didn't want to travel to China so soon after giving birth. In that case, they should have just waited. And also, just like the fact that she read the script and is like, no, I'm not traveling to China for that. So they recast her with Maria Bello. Maria Bello isn't necessarily bad as Evie, it's just she's bad by comparison. She just doesn't have the same chemistry with Brendan Fraser that Rachel had. Jet Li is in this. Jet Li is a badass as always. Jonathan Hanna and Brendan Fraser are both back. They are great as always. Michelle Yeoh and Isabel Yeung are both good. Luke Ford is pretty good as grown-up Alex. He and Brendan Fraser actually have better chemistry than Brendan and Maria Bello have. There are a few funny moments. The action is pretty good, but the writing and the CGI are both crap, and Rob Cohen's directing is a step down from some of his other movies. The practical effects we get are awesome. Some of the CGI is actually decent. And then there's some of it that's just awful. Like the Yetis. The CGI Yeti. Oh yeah, there are Yetis in this movie. The CGI Yetis are just not good at all. The CGI for the Terracotta Warriors is fine, and the CGI for the Undead Army is fine.
These are, they're good undead guys, right?
CUN sent us.
Do you think he speaks English?
Where was CUN?
But, like, aside from that, most of the other CGI is just crap. My score is 2 out of 5. My number 4 is The Mummy, 2017. Where do I even begin? I love this movie in theory. I like what they were going for. I like the story they were trying to tell. I like what they were trying to do. I like the point that they ended on. The journey to get there was a mess. One of the main problems is Tom Cruise. I love Tom Cruise as an actor and as an action star. However, he was seriously miscast in this movie. For the character they wrote, they needed someone like 20 years younger. Hell, Jake Johnson would have been a better fit for the lead role. This movie can't really decide what kind of tone it's going for. Like, most of it seems like it wants to be serious, like the Boris Karloff Mummy, but then you have there's some silly stuff. Like, Jake Johnson is the comic relief, and he feels like he was pulled out of the Brendan Fraser Mummy movies. And then there are other aspects of it that are very silly and feel more in line with those. So it's kind of indecisive in that regard. Sofia Boutella as Aminette is great. She is the best part of this movie, followed closely by Russell Crowe as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
You can be that cure.
Stop.
A sacrifice.
Just stop.
For the greater good.
I'm not interested in that at all. Okay.
Don't.
Okay.
Ninja.
We're just gonna take a minute, and we're all gonna come up with a new plan.
We have to go. You don't know what you're doing.
Really? I know exactly what I'm doing.
Oh, my dear Henry Jekyll. If ever I've seen Satan's signature upon a face, it is on that of your new friend.
Hey.
Now, run, Mr. Morton.
What?
Run!
Russell Crowe probably gives the better performance, but he doesn't really have a whole lot of plot relevance. He's mostly just there to set up future spin-offs and sequels that will never happen because the Dark Universe is dead. Like, Sofia Boutella actually had some plot relevance because, you know, she's the villain. I mean, it's well shot, the editing is decent enough. I was gonna say something about this movie being the directorial debut of Alex Kurtzman, and in that regard, it's not that bad. However, it turns out it's not. He directed his first movie 5 years earlier, something called People Like Us. This movie is a mess. It's like, I want to like it. I really do. I don't even hate it. I think I dislike it less than most people. Although I will say, the plane crash is awesome. And once again, it is just proof of Tom Cruise's commitment to realism in the action he does for movies. My score is 2 out of 5. Number 3 is The Scorpion King. This one was brought to us by Chuck Russell, the man who gave us Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Mask, and the Blob remake, which is like one of the greatest horror remakes of all time. This one is not his best work, but you know, it's not awful. As Rotten Tomatoes puts it, action-adventure doesn't get much cheesier than The Scorpion King. Yeah, that sounds about right. This movie it's not a good movie, but it's a lot of fun. This is the one that actually had The Rock on set for more than 3 days. Apparently, the version of The Scorpion King featured in the first Scorpion King spin-off is not the same character from The Mummy Returns. Mummy Returns Scorpion King is like the grandson or great-grandson of Scorpion King spin-off Scorpion King, which is why their personalities are so vastly different. The plot is nothing to write home about. It's not fully generic, but it definitely hits a lot of familiar beats. It's mostly saved by the action and the acting. And honestly, the directing is pretty good too. The movie takes quite a bit of artistic license with a variety of things. So, artistic license. As TV Tropes puts it, the poison arrow that Matthias was stabbed with would not have been much of a threat. Well, you know, aside from getting stabbed. The type of scorpion the venom was taken from, an emperor scorpion, was chosen because they are huge and look creepy. However, in reality, that scorpion is only a little bit more dangerous to a human than, like, a bee. With scorpions, the bigger they are, the less dangerous their venom, since they will use their claws to kill prey and their size to frighten off predators. Matthias would have been in greater danger from blood loss or infection than from the venom. There's a whole bunch of artistic license history, there's a whole bunch of artistic license physics. Here, if the first 5 minutes of The Scorpion King do not have you in tears of laughter, you're part of a tough crowd. To clarify, Matthias shoots 3 mooks at the same time, with 3 arrows shot at the same time from his bow. The center mook is sent flying, flipping head over heels at least 15 meters, smashes through the wall, and keeps flying for another 10 meters. For all the things this movie gets hilariously wrong in terms of history, physics, the scorpion thing, and pretty much everything else, it does properly depict one thing that most fantasy films don't. It actually takes a lot of muscle power to draw back the string of a bow. And I'm not talking like a compound bow where there's the gears on top and bottom that do some of the work for you. I mean like a regular-ass recurve bow. Especially for a bow as big as Matthias's, it would take someone as big as The Rock to actually pull it back and fire it properly. When Takmet tries to show off in front of some girls, he can barely pull the bowstring back an inch. I have fired both kinds of bows before. The recurve bow is much harder, so I will give them credit for getting that right. The Rock is really good in the lead role. The action is solid. The musical score is pretty good too.
For your father.
You know, if you want to watch some cheesy action adventure, you can do a hell of a lot worse. My score is 2.5 out of 5. Number 2 is The Mummy Returns. This movie is a step down from the first, but it's still a lot of fun. The returning cast are all solid, and Freddy Both is perfectly fine as little kid Alex. It does hit some of the same plot points and beats as the first movie. But it also adds in enough new stuff to make up for that. The action is just as good as it was in the first one. The CGI is about on par with the CGI in the first movie. The difference is that there's more CGI here, so the bad stuff is more noticeable. The Rock only shows up in like the beginning of the movie, in the prologue. Once we get to the climax and the Scorpion King shows up, The Rock is gone, and it's like one of the most infamously bad CGI creations ever put to film. I do think it would have been cool to actually see Imhotep at full power fighting the Scorpion King. Wasted opportunity there, but I do find it hilarious that he is all ready for this. He is pumped. And then he shows up and all of a sudden, nope, Anubis makes him mortal. The portrayal of Anubis in these first two Mummy movies, in addition to being inaccurate to Egyptian mythology, is also just not very consistent, but you know, whatever. Gods be like that sometimes. Just look at Zeus. If you know, you know. The new characters are a mixed bag. Some of them are fun and nice additions. Others are just not very memorable. I do like that Patricia Velasquez has more screen time as her reincarnated version of Anaxunamu. She's really good in the role, to the point that this movie is the only reason I recognized her when I watched The Curse of La Llorona. I really hope I pronounce this correctly. Adewale Akinnuoye Agbaje. He is really good. He is one of the new characters that I actually like. Like, he is a badass. He has some funny moments. He is decently fleshed out. I also love that there is an unnamed henchman of the bad guys. We never learn his character's name, but he's like a featured extra. He first shows up in like the first fight. He is the one who throws the knife at Rick, and then Rick catches it and throws it back. This dude dodges it, and it hits the guy behind him.
Shoot him!
And then he keeps showing up throughout the movie and surviving until finally he and Jonathan are being attacked by the pygmy mummies, and they're in a circle of some rocks. Jonathan pulls something out of his ass about, oh, as long as we're in these stones, we should be safe. These are like ritual stones. And the dude believes him. And then he gets hit by some pygmy spears. And Jonathan's just like, my mistake. Runs away.
Look! There's a burial ground! We're safe! We're safe! See those sacred stones? They'll never cross those!
You are sure?
Yes, of course, I'm sure! sorry. My mistake.
Like, I love that the fact that there's like this nameless character survived that far into the movie is pretty impressive. The humor in this movie is on par with the first movie. I especially love the fact that at the very end, as they're flying away from the Classian Temple, Jonathan sees the giant, I want to say emerald? Pretty sure it was green. Whatever, the giant jewel on top of the pyramid. And he's like, pull me up, pull me up. No, wait, let me down. It's not worth your life. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And unlike most movies where something like that happens, he actually grabs it and gets away with it. he grabs it and survives, and he gets to take it home. I love that. That's hilarious. Also, another thing I find hilarious is that this movie subtly confirms that Benny saves the world. Let me clarify. Benny, the greedy, sniveling coward from the first movie, saves the day. Specifically, Benny's greed saves the day. Because at the end of the first movie, he's loading treasure onto his camel and then he's going to ride away. But then he dies before he can actually get out the last time. And so when Rick and crew are leaving at the end of the first movie, one of the camels they take is the one Benny loaded with treasure, which I assume is how they paid for the big-ass house they have in this movie. However, at one point, Jonathan is just carrying around one of his trinkets, which turns out to be the Spear of Osiris. And at one point he mentions that it's one of the trinkets that was on the camel they found when they left, which means that it's one of the items that Benny brought out of the temple in the first movie. And that is the weapon that ultimately kills the Scorpion King. So I shit you not, Benny's greed saves the world. That is just hilarious. The returning characters all get fleshed out more. This movie just adds even more fuel to the fan theory. I don't know, I don't think it's been confirmed that Jonathan is a World War I veteran, which in the first movie, it explains why he's good with a pistol, and it explains why he is an alcoholic, because he would have PTSD, or as they called it back then, shell shock. So it's the fact that he's an alcoholic and is like generally very self-preserving and like not very courageous. He's the cowardly lion, where he's like a coward most of the time, but when it really matters, he will come through, he will deliver, he will help, he will save the day. Like in this movie, we see he's a crack shot with a rifle. And also, I would argue that this movie has a better musical score than the first movie. That's like probably maybe not the only area where it's an improvement, but one of the few areas where it's an improvement. My score is 3 out of 5. Finally, my number 1 is The Mummy. There were a lot of Indiana Jones knockoffs released during the 80s and also into the 90s, and also since then. This movie wasn't necessarily one of them, but this is one of the few movies that actually succeeded at recreating that Indiana Jones-esque sense of adventure. The sequel too, but like the first movie even more so. This movie is not a significant cinematic achievement in any regard, but it's just so much fun. And it's also just a really well-made movie. Like I said, it's not exceptional in any way, but it's just really, really good overall. Like, it's very well-rounded. The acting is solid across the board. The humor hits more than it misses. The writing is actually good. Stephen Sommers' directing is really good. The CGI isn't the best, but the practical effects are solid. The musical score is solid. And there's just so many little things that I love. The fact that, so during, not the opening, like, the opening scene following the prologue. Our first scene in the 1920s. We have Rick and Benny in the French Foreign Legion. That alone is some solid fleshing out of the character, because the French Foreign Legion, what that is, it's basically an opportunity for foreign criminals who have been imprisoned in France to earn their freedom by serving in the French military, which is why it's the French Foreign Legion, because it's made up pretty much entirely of foreigners. So right away, that's some good setting up of a little, telling us something about the characters. The fact that they wouldn't be in this situation if they hadn't been arrested in France for something. Little bits of realism in this movie that really help sell it. The fact that the French Foreign Legionnaires are using the rifle they're using is, I think, the Lebel model 1886. I know 1880 something, which by the time of this movie, the 1920s. That model of rifle was obsolete, and yet for some reason it was still in use into the 1930s. But, you know, militaries be like that sometimes. What's the thing from Halo? If it hurts, it works. Anyway, so they start out with their bolt-action rifles, and they start out, they're firing, and then when it comes time to reload, I mean, you see other soldiers doing this, but they mainly focus on Rick doing it. In reality, the Lebel had a magazine capacity of like 8 rounds, so he fires his 8 rounds, but then instead of doing a full reload, he's single loading. Now, with a bolt-action rifle, you can just put in your 5-round stripper clip and you're good to go. Or if you're British, you can put in your 2 5-round stripper clips and you're good to go. With the Lebel, because this was not a stripper clip, this is not that kind of bolt-action rifle. It had a tube magazine, which took much longer to reload, to the point that soldiers who used it figured out that it was faster to just load around fire, to just single load it. So yeah, little things like that really elevate the movie. The character work in this movie is so good. Like, all of the characters are... Not everybody gets development, but everybody is pretty fleshed out. Like, Benny is the sniveling coward, but he's not just the sniveling coward. He is the sniveling coward, but he's also smart and pragmatic. Another really good bit of comedy. When he's cornered by Imhotep, he's got his cross necklace and he starts praying in whatever language. And that didn't work. So he pulls out a whole necklace of like 15 different religious symbols, cycling through them and saying a prayer in each language, until he finally gets to Hebrew, which Imhotep recognizes as the language of the slaves. His words, not mine. But the fact that that works, A, is hilarious. B, just shows that Benny may be a sniveling coward, but he's not an idiot. Like, the fact that he knows a little bit in that many languages is honestly pretty impressive. Even like the side characters, like the American team and the people helping them, they're all pretty fleshed out. They don't get any development, but they're fleshed out. And I love the fact that Henderson, I think was his name, is basically just a cowboy version of Rick. Okay, sorry. An even more overtly cowboy version of Rick. The actor who plays him, Stephen Dunham, was actually in the running to play Rick. He actually auditioned to play Rick. He didn't get the part, but they still liked him, so they wrote the part of Henderson for him, which I love. Yeah, this movie is just so good. This movie is just such a fun time. Cinematography and editing are on point. I already talked about the music and the acting.
Well. Let me guess. Spring cleaning.
Nice shot.
My score is 3.5 out of 5. Hey everyone, what's your ranking? Let me know down in the comments. Like and subscribe and all that. If you don't like the video, tell me why. Then subscribe anyway, and you'll get updated when I upload a new video. And you can tell me why that one sucks, or where I've improved, or whatever the case may be. That's all for now. Stay safe in these crazy times.